Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's HAPPI Hour webinar, which is titled Carers in Extra Care Housing. My name is Jerome Billeter, and I'm delighted to be chairing today's session, which is being held in partnership with Carers UK to coincide with this week's Carers Week 2025. So Carers Week is a time to recognize and celebrate the essential role of unpaid carers. And today we are going to shine a light on how both formal and informal care interact and coexist with extra care housing, within extra care housing, which is a model that continues to evolve. So during this session, we'll be sharing new insights from Carers UK's State of Caring Survey with Melanie Crew from Carers UK. We'll also be hearing about a new NIHR-funded research project on domiciliary care led by the University of Kent with Florine Petruvalian, who's a senior research fellow at University of Kent. And we'll be reflecting on wider policy reform and housing innovation with John Payne, who's the founder of Matters Grey. So as I previously mentioned, there will be time for audience questions, which we'll go through during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. So please drop your questions in the Q&A box as we go. Okay, so we are now going to start with our first speaker. So I'm very pleased to welcome Melanie Crew, Research and Policy Manager at Carers UK. Melanie leads the State of Caring Survey, which is the UK's most comprehensive study into the lives of unpaid carers. And today she'll be sharing housing-related findings from the latest report, helping to highlight the real-world condition carers face. Melanie, over to you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. Great. So as Jerome says, I'm Melanie. I'm Research and Policy Manager at Carers UK. And I'm just going to talk through we've done with unpaid carers in relation to housing. Just before I get into that, I just wanted to give a bit of an overview of unpaid carers. So census data shows that there are just under 6 million unpaid carers in the UK, which is about 9% of the population, or 1 in 11 people. That is probably an underestimate. Partly because not everybody would consider themselves or identify themselves as an unpaid carer, even though they probably are. And it's partly because the census question on unpaid care is not very clear. The amount of hours that people are caring has increased over the last 10 years. So there are more people now caring for 50 or more hours a week. We know that women are more likely to care than men. So in England and Wales, about 60% of carers are women. It's people aged 55 to 59 who are most likely to be caring, but it's the oldest carers who provide the highest number of hours of care per week. So for women, it's those in their mid to late 70s. And for men, it's those in their mid to late 80s who are most likely to be caring for 50 or more hours per week. We also can see from the census that more unpaid carers are disabled compared with non-carers. So in England and Wales, for example, that's 28%. So the research that I'm going to go through today is taken from our annual State of Caring survey with carers. We're really fortunate that we get a high number of carers take part in that survey. So last year we had 12,500 carers take part, and we were really grateful for support that we received from HousingLIN, who kindly promoted that survey for us, which led to even more carers taking part. And in terms of key findings generally, the survey found that many carers are struggling financially. So 61% are worried about living costs in the future. carer's allowance is the main carer's benefit, but it's the lowest benefit of its kind, and it's not enough to cover the costs of essentials, which can often be higher for carers. So having your heating on if the person you care for is unwell, running medical equipment, and so on. Carers can also often struggle financially because of reducing their working hours, and that obviously affects income. We found that quite a high proportion of carers, 73%, can find it stressful to combine work with paid to combine caring with paid employment, and many have had to give up work completely. We've also been finding recently, because we do the survey every year, that more and more carers are struggling with their own health, with their physical and mental health. And the problem is that so many carers are busy caring that they don't prioritise their own health. And look after their own health and well-being. We know that caring can be stressful. It can lead to depression and loneliness, a loss of identity, feelings of being undervalued. And we know that a lot of carers feel that they just don't get enough support with caring from health and social care services. They can't take a break, and they don't have enough information and advice about caring. So this is the report which we published. As I said, it's based on our State of Caring survey. And what we did last year was include some questions in relation to housing, which we hadn't really focused on too much as a topic before. And we've published this report in partnership with HousingLIN. So you can find that on the Carers UK website. It's also on the HousingLIN website. And I'm just going to go through the main findings now. So we found that the majority of carers own their own home. 17% are renting from a local authority or housing association, 7% renting from a private landlord, and 7% live with family. We found that carers who were renting were more likely to say that they were struggling financially. So, for example, 50% of carers who are renting are struggling to make ends meet, compared with 19% of carers who own their own home. And carers who were renting were also more likely to say that they were in debt, and also more likely to say that they were worried about living costs in the future. And that is similar to data from the Family Resources Survey, which is carried out by government. And that also shows that unpaid carers who rent either socially or privately have a higher rate of poverty than those who mortgage or own their own homes. So the majority of carers said that they live with the person that they care for, so 77%. I should say that is higher than the Family Resources Survey tends to find, which is more like 50%. Our survey, as helpful as it is, it's not a representative sample. We get a lot of carers caring for a high amount of hours take part. And I think that probably skews things a little bit, because I think the carers who are caring for a high intensity are probably more likely to live with the person that they care for. When we asked carers about their housing situations, some carers talked about how their living circumstances have changed because of caring and the impact that that had had on their well-being. So some people said that they had to give up their own home. They felt like they didn't have their own space anymore, or that they weren't able to spend as much time in their own home as they would like. So we found that over a fifth of carers said that they are struggling to afford their rent or mortgage payments. And we found that younger carers in London, ethnic minority carers, were more likely to say that that was the case. And in particular, we found that carers who are in receipt of social security benefits were struggling with those costs. So, for example, over a quarter of carers in receipt of carers allowance said that they were struggling. And carers were also worried about costs increasing in the future. So 38% of carers said that they were worried about increases to their rent or mortgage payments in the future. We heard from some carers who said that they were worried about what they would do if the person that they care for needed to move into a care home, where they would live, how they would manage if they had to sell the family home. Some carers told us that they wanted to downsize or find cheaper accommodation, and we even heard from carers who had been homeless and had really been struggling with their housing costs. I just wanted to share a few comments from carers, so I'll just let you read those, because I think carers can really explain better than I can what some of that impact can be on them. So one of the things that came up quite a bit in relation to housing costs was the challenge of paying for household repairs. So 42% of carers said that they're struggling to afford the cost of household repairs. So things like dealing with damp, drafty windows, things that are broken, fixing plumbing, etc. And it seemed that there were quite a few carers who were not getting that repair work done because they simply couldn't afford to do so, and they were living in conditions that were not really suitable for both them, and if they lived with the person that they care for, that obviously has a negative impact on that person's health as well. So you can see this carer whose quote I've highlighted here is living in a home that's full of damp, and they just can't afford to get those repairs done. So quite a few carers who were struggling with their housing costs said that they wanted to move somewhere that was more suitable or accessible, but they were unable to do so because of the cost of that. Some carers who were renting said that they were on the waiting list for more suitable council housing, but hadn't heard anything or had been told there was nothing available. We also heard from carers who had paid for adaptations within their home themselves, which had been costly, and they'd had to use quite a bit of their savings to do so. And just another couple of comments here from carers about the costs of making adaptations to their home. So I think it's clear that carers are struggling with their housing costs. And I wanted to just go through some of our recommendations at Carers UK, which we've included within the report. And these are kind of specifically in relation to supporting carers with their finances. And that is probably one of our main campaigning areas, is supporting carers who are struggling to make ends meet. We know that carers are contributing £184 billion a year, and yet they are often struggling to get by, and that's not acceptable. So we continually call for government to increase the level of carers allowance, and also for there to be a review of the eligibility rules around carers allowance so more people can access it. We would like to see a prevention of carers allowance overpayments. You may have seen this in the media recently. It's something that we've been campaigning for a while, but it's received a lot of attention recently. And it's where a carer has earned slightly over the earnings limit for carers allowance, and they've then had to pay back the entire carers allowance benefit for each month that they wrongly received it. And it's just such a complicated process that carers are not aware, and it takes DWP in some cases several years to notify someone that they've exceeded the earnings limit, and so all of this debt mounts up. We'd also like there to be additional financial support to carers of state pension age, because the majority of carers can't receive carers allowance once they receive their state pension because of overlapping benefits rules. And I know lots of older carers find that really unfair because the amount of caring that they're doing hasn't changed since they reached state pension age. We're also really concerned about the government's proposed changes to disability benefits, including PIP. A lot of people will no longer be eligible for PIP. And because PIP is a gateway benefit to carers allowance, many carers will lose their carers allowance as a result. The government has said themselves that'll be around 150,000 carers. We would also like quick action taken from the Casey review of social care services, and for there to be sufficient funding for social care services so that carers can take a break and stay in paid employment if they wish to do so. We were really pleased to see the introduction in law of 5 days of unpaid carers leave. That's something that we campaigned for many years at Carers UK, but we know that not everybody can afford to take unpaid carers leave. So we would like that to be paid carers leave. And then finally, one of our core asks of government is for there to be a national carers strategy. And really that's in recognition that caring impacts on so many different aspects of a person's life that you really need that cross-government approach and recognition of how difficult caring can be. And the last carer strategy was 2008. So you can see that there is a real need for that. But I'm just going to stop sharing now because that is the end of my presentation, and look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Melanie. That was very interesting. And yeah, thank you for the rich insights, really eye-opening. So thank you very much, Melanie. So I'd just like to remind our audience that if you have any question, please post them in the Q&A box and we'll reconvene at the end of the session to go through these. But first, I'll hand over to our next speaker, Dr. Florin Petru-Vadien, who's a senior research fellow at the University of Kent. So Florin is leading a new NIHR SSCR-funded research project that investigates the benefits and costs of domiciliary care. And HousingLIN is pleased to be involved in this project, and we're grateful to Florin for joining us today to give us an overview of its aims and emerging themes. Florin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jerome, and good afternoon all. I would like to introduce to you the opportunity actually to participate in a research study on the benefits and cost of domiciliary care. It is a project funded by the NIHR Policy Research Programme that started in December last year. It's a 3-year project. The study is led by the University of Kent in partnership with the King's College London, Ipsos, Skills for Care, Home Care Association, and HousingLIN. The main aim of the study is to help fill a quite important gap in what is known currently about people's experiences of using home care and the value that home care has in improving people's lives. For this, we intend to assess the value for money of home care among people with different care needs, also comparatively assess the value for money of care received in different settings, like people's standard housing, home care, in housing with care, as well as care received in care homes. And we also intend to compare the impact on people's lives of home care that is regulated by the Care Quality Commission with care that is not monitored for quality or safety, like, for example, that provided by directly employing personal assistants. And finally, we also intend to assess the impact that formal paid domiciliary care services have not only on people accessing care, but also on their unpaid carers. Project findings are expected to inform policy decision-making to support people with care needs live more independent lives for longer, provide guidance about home care options, as well as support individuals and their families to make more informed decisions about their care. The main reason for the gap in evidence on the value home care has on people's lives is the lack of suitable data for such economic evaluation studies. So a very important part of the project will be a new data collection. This will be from adults age 18 and over, accessing home care either through agencies like, for example, visiting or living care, housing with care, or by directly employing a personal assistant, but irrespective of whether they self-fund their care or their care is funded and or commissioned by a local authority. The survey material is currently developed, and it's developed in a close collaboration with people with lived experience of social care, is to make the survey material accessible. Moreover, in order to ensure that as many home care recipients as possible can respond to the survey, assuming that they have the capacity to consent, the survey will be available both as a paper and an online version, as well as telephone or face-to-face interview. And our plan is actually to recruit people receiving home care through registered care locations in Kent, Surrey and Sussex, East Midlands and Yorkshire and the Humber, so to give a quite good national spread. Therefore, we will need the support of registered care location managers. And we gave quite a bit of consideration on the burden the participation in our study may put on care managers. To keep this minimal, we had help for planning the data collection from people with knowledge of home care providing business, like, for example, Jeremy Potiers from HousingLIN, Jane Townsend from the Home Care Association, and also the owners, managers of care providing businesses. Our main ask of care managers is that after registering their interest with us, to complete a short survey in September, October this year. Through this survey, we will collect some key characteristics of the care location that are needed in the analysis, and then to distribute early next year survey packs to the people supported, to their clients. As mentioned earlier, we partner with the market research specialist Ipsos, so they will do the fieldwork, the data collection, and they will provide survey packs in pre-stamped envelopes, so there will be no financial cost to registered care locations for distributing survey packs to clients. We also think that there will be some benefits to care locations, some potential benefits from participating in our study. For example, through potential positive impact on CQC quality rating, by being able to demonstrate participation in research aimed at improving care outcomes and people's quality of life. We also offer participating care locations benchmarking briefs at the end of the study that will show the quality of life of their clients compared to that of similar care locations in their region or nationally. And we will be able to provide, for example, insights into the quality of life domains that a care location is doing particularly well on, as well as other aspects where there is room for improvement. Also, I want to mention that we will use methods that we developed in a previous study through which we can adjust the quality of life scores for different clients, characteristics and care needs. So in other words, we'll make sure that the comparison are as much as possible like for like. We also offer financial compensation for staff time spent in the study. And finally, care locations lacking staff capacity may also get support. So we have some promises from the NIHR Regional Research Delivery Network team for completing the required task for our study. So in particular to care location managers and care coordinators, if I piqued your interest, on this last slide, there is a link to more information on our project website with more details on the study, the data collection, and how we use the data collected, and also a registration form. I would like also to express my appreciation to HousingLIN colleagues for including this information in the chat and also in newsletters going out to you. And I would like to stress in particular to managers of registered care locations that we as researchers, we are very willing and are keen to provide the hard evidence on the value that your care services are providing to your clients, but we will not be able to do that without your help and support. So we hope you will register to take part in the study. And also, if you are a national regional manager, I would very much appreciate if you can pass on this information to your local managers or care coordinators. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to take questions and comments in the Q&A session. Back to you, Jerome.
Thank you, Florin. Thank you for this excellent overview. So yeah, we'll make sure to report on the developments throughout the project. So we'll update our members as the project moves forward. Great. So now to round up our speaker lineup, I'm pleased to introduce John Payne. John Payne, who is founder of Matters Grey. And John today will be discussing themes from his latest HousingLIN viewpoints on the future of care in housing, alongside his reflection on the newly established Casey Commission. John, over to you.
Hi.
Hi, John.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Okay, my name's John Payne. I set up Matters Grey, a consultancy, and have been doing that for just over a decade. The starting point, this is very much a sort of policy wonky kind of approach to where we are at in a number of issues around funding, particularly with a focus extra care and older people. And I've used the Albert Einstein quote, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again," because a key theme of this is looking at DILNOT report. And in a sense, I think everyone will know that a lot of people have been trying to implement it and it hasn't got very far. I'm hoping to learn from my experience, having spent over 30 years in developing extra care housing, that might lead to some different ways of thinking about the problems. I work, as I say, in extra care for over 30 years, and in the last formal working environment, I was director of the Extra Care Charitable Trust, involved at quite a critical time of the development of the extra care, and in terms of developing a very substantial portfolio of retirement villages, which had things like large communal facilities, higher ends of dependency management, and an opportunity to both rent and buy. And it was very interesting to me, the issues that were coming up in the carers' earlier comments, because there's common themes here in terms of how people struggle to move out of hard to maintain difficult houses and have care needs as well. And in my roles, I've been involved in a wide range of different organisations, whether it's third sector or some profit providers as well. What I'm wanting to raise is that there's an inability to totally implement the DILNOT report. And the problem that DILNOT highlighted was that there's a cliff edge funding for, in older people. 1 in 4 older people are quite likely to need residential care. Typical length of stay could be 2 years, could be paying £100,000 a year. I'm in a very interesting position at the moment. I'm a carer. I'm responsible for my aunt's care, and she is 102. And if she were to live the same length as my grandmother, who was born in 1896, the cost of her care will be in the order of £600,000. And that just highlights the cost of care and the real point made by Dilma in terms of the cliff-edge nature of it. But there's a common theme, and it's very prescient at the moment with all the debates about winter fuel benefits. This talk was actually written just before the elections. But there's a whole theme of there is no money, lean burn, priorities of working people, or baby boomers have got to look at more senior members of society to pay their part. And I just highlight that at the end with the preemptive decision, as I see it, to scrap universal winter fuel payments, which has now really come full circle. There's often a split and a schism between older people and younger people. So I'm going to look at this from an older people's perspective and information. Older people are actually an opportunity. 80% of older people are owner-occupiers. But that isn't the full story. They may be asset rich, but revenue poor. And the latest data from the government has said that 75% of older people have incomes of less than £35,000, hence the decisions about winter fuel. In fact, there's a lot of people on much lower incomes than that. But also, although they may be housing owners, and again, the carers research said how many of housing owners are carers, they own less valuable properties. The figures into 624 was £305,000, but it's often, as in that earlier report today, they live in less good accommodation, harder to heat, harder to maintain accommodation. And in the context of today, extra care is a route out for some of those people, but often they can't really afford to buy in for like because of the substantial communal facilities that are built as an integrated part of it. And so there needs to be ways of enabling that to happen. The positive is that if people can move out, then they can then release family housing, typically. The other thing I want to say is that we're actually really rather running out of time, in the sense that baby boomers are beginning to ever increase and start towards peak demand. What I want to do now is to look at a thing that, in my experience, most people are totally unfamiliar with, which is called something that's called an immediate needs care annuity. It's not for all, but it's something that I think is worth exploring, which in a sense is just like a pension, in which you pay up some sum of money and they then give you a return. And I've given you some figures here for an 85-year-old. The costs vary based on age and care needs. It's a very interesting area. Most people aren't aware of it. And I actually wonder if there isn't an opportunity for state working with the insurance company in a partnership way, in some ways working towards capping liability, because the real problem here is if somebody does live a very long time, the risks of those costs. In terms of extra care housing models, I've already said about the importance of shared ownership models, that you really need a model which you can both rent, outright purchase, or maybe purchase a share. In my personal experience, a lot of owner-occupiers might typically afford 75% share and then get help with service charges and other costs in terms of benefit assistance. The great news about this kind of model, which was well developed by the Extra Care Charitable Trust, is they're then bringing those housing assets to help drive forward highly intensive capital projects. So again, they're a resource that meets need rather than being a challenge to meet need. I want to say that not all extra care is the same, and standards of care are important. Things like depth of care provision. There is a problem in the market of resales. Some properties can take a long time to sell unreasonably, in my view, and needing therefore to manage voids, because if you have voids in the property, it creates a problem in terms of challenging for extra care, for domestic care being provided and not having enough people in the home's developments to provide that care. And I also wonder, maybe a bit intriguingly really, whether there was a role of HousingLIN to look at housing not just simply as a product, but to think about what is provided and the depth of provision. Another area of interesting development, which I think needs to be pushed, and in the past this might have been seen as very challenging, but the Extra Charitable Trust model is you pay in to buy a property and you get back what you pay in less a management charge and a fairly modest management charge. And my experience over time is that's gone from, oh, is that a really good idea? I really want back what I want to see my housing equity grow. I don't simply want to get back what I put in because it will grow so much. But in fact, in reality, the lifestyle is the most important driver, and given commitment to buy back actually creates and removes a lot of uncertainty, because a lot of people can find themselves having to only get back as an estate less than the amount that was paid in. But also, again, it's driven opportunities to cross-subsidise care costs if you're able to get some equity growth in developments. The one thing that I think is really, really interesting is thinking about models that can look to integrating care costs within scheme purchase. And that's particularly true of Hartwick Oak. They do have very well developed over a long time frame. But we need to work towards an idea in which housing purchase in ageing can also wrap into it care costs. This one, I was fascinated with the wonders of AI just to pull some of these figures together, because there is an opportunity here in the sense that baby boomers coming through, there is a growth in inheritance tax going from 7.1 billion currently to 9.7 billion going forwards. And it's going to grow from 3.7% of estates to 6%. So this is a potential for funding. It's rare to have an opportunity to solve challenges coming from the baby boomers and who've never had it so good. And this might be a way of finding ways of trying to drive forward a strategy for meeting baby boomers in the near and ongoing future. I hope those are a few ideas have some resonance in a way that we might be able to develop different services as part of the ongoing case review and thinking through the current challenges within health and social care. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Don, for these insightful reflections. Right, so we are now going to move to the Q&A part of this session. So thank you for those of you who have posted some questions in the Q&A box. Don't hesitate to put some more as we go along. So I'm just going to start with a question from Elaine Hollerhead. So she is asking, Florin, that's a question for you. Data collection for receipt of home care. I noticed the Southwest is not included. Can you please explain why?
Thank you, Jerome. And I think the second question is also related to that. So why we have restricted the data collection to those specific area. So yeah, thank you, Elaine, and also to the anonymous attendee. So we had to restrict data collection due to several reasons. So first of all, ADAS, so that is the Association of Adult Social Care Directors, they are actually not seeing it positively for care projects to go and collect data in whole England, so nationwide. Also, for us, in terms of practicalities, our understanding is that in each local authority where we collect data, even if we do not involve the local authority, but if we are collecting data from people that are supported and have care commissioned by a local authority, then we have to apply for a research governance with that local authority. So there probably are differences. So some local authorities are quite fine if we have research ethics approval from the Health Research Authority. Others want us to do more detailed applications. But currently we include with those areas, so Kent, Surrey and Sussex, East Midlands, Yorkshire and Humber, 29 local authorities. So it's quite a lot of work to apply also just in those for research governance. So extending our area is it will be an administrative burden for which we don't have the capacity and the funding. However, we are in discussions with ADAS, and I think if we see that we are not able to recruit sufficient care providers in the local authorities where we are focusing now, we will explore to extend the area. And we probably will try to find local authorities which are more flexible, so which say that, yes, if you have HRA ethics approval, then it's fine to collect data in our area. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Florin. So next question, I've got a question for you, Melanie, from Clarissa. So Clarissa is asking, with the information that you provided and stats regarding carers, were these just for carers of adults, or do they also include carers of children under 18 with a disability, for example?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's all carers, so it's a real mix of different caring situations. So it does include people who would be caring for a child under 18. It might be someone caring for a spouse or partner, or someone caring for a parent. And I think in the survey we tend to find it fairly evenly split across those three. And then other people perhaps who are caring for a sibling or other family member. But yes, it does include parents of children.
Great, thank you for this clarification. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of the questions in the Q&A box, but I may have one for you, John. In your view, what are the most immediate opportunities or barriers for embedding a stronger care vision in future housing policy or investments?
Sorry, what are the impediments to embedding it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure older people are flavour of the month. I mean, part of my starting point was to say there isn't any money. We can't make things work, and there are no easy solutions. And I think, therefore, and also, the Dilnot report has been around for so long that it's kind of almost got tired. So, I suppose the only reason why I've kind of written this paper is to say, hang on, can we just wake up? Can we shake things around a bit? Because there are solutions, but you have to think outside of the box. When the Extra Care Charitable Trust set up the No Equity Growth Lease, I was pretty concerned about how to make it work because I was the guy who was leading it. But it has taken root and it has made a real difference. One of my colleagues quite recently said, well, it was about the value of incremental change. The trouble is with the baby boomers is we're on a bit of a shorter fuse now. So I think we've got to innovate. I think we've got to learn from good experience. I've just seen a chat question come in about, we know there's need and how do you do it? And I've just gone back and said, well, see if in the local authority there are housing providers, housing associations who might be willing to do a mixed tenure. The slight problem is there's a good lead time. But, you know, again, the other point I want to make in that is 80% of older people aren't homeowners. They may not have very valuable houses, but the rented model doesn't really suit a lot of those people. So I think, I suppose what I'm doing is I'm shaking a can, it might go off pop, because I'm trying to drive different views and different experiences that can make a difference. And I'm on a journey to see how I might help some of that happen.
Thank you, John. I have a question for you, Florin. It may be too early in the project, but based on what you've seen so far, what would you say are the early insights that are emerging around the economic or well-being value of domiciliary care? How do you think these might influence decisions around housing with care models? It may be a bit soon to ask this question, but do you already have some insights?
That is very early. We have not yet the data to, to analyze that. Yes, but actually, from what we have seen so far, because we've looked also at available data from the Adult Social Care Survey, is that people in housing with the scare schemes usually have higher quality of life compared to those living in standard housing. And it is probably related to the fact that they probably have more social interaction in those types of housing, and they have services at hand. But yes, it's very early to say, because what we need ideally for our study, and the Adult Social Care Survey is not providing, is that link between quality of life outcomes and care inputs. So that is what is new to what we try to bring evidence on.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Melanie, how do you see the findings from the State of Caring survey? How do you see them shaping national priorities, particularly in terms of influencing the housing sector itself?
So I think it was really beneficial to put those questions in last year and to focus on that for the first time. I mean, we always ask carers about their financial circumstances, and I think we'd seen comments from carers relating to housing, but we didn't have those quantitative questions where we could share some of those kind of key stats. So I'm really pleased that we were able to do that last year, and that we've now published this briefing, which we can share at events like this and with government, because I do think it's not a very I mean, caring generally is not talked about enough, but I think issues that carers can have with housing in relation to the things that I talked about, you know, household repairs, not being able to afford to have those done, not being able to afford to have your house adapted, having to be on the waiting list for accessible housing. I do think it's worth us using those stats, potentially asking different questions in future surveys, just to add to that. But we continually call for more financial support for carers from the government. So this will just add to the evidence base that we already use when we meet with MPs, when we have conversations with policymakers, and when we're in Parliament. And we're at a big event in Parliament tomorrow, drop-in event for MPs to raise awareness of unpaid carers as part of Carers Week. So I think they're good stats to have now, so that we can kind of talk about perhaps what was not a very well recognised issue.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's see. Is there another question? Yes, Claire Moore has posted a question. I imagine that extra care is also excellent for carers as well as those who need support. However, if there is a younger carer of a parent and the parent passes, is there a concern that the carer would then be required to leave extra care? For example, a perceived or real concern about precarity of housing. So, who would like to answer that question?
I think it depends on the extra care scheme, because HousingLIN funding would typically have an age entry point of 60 plus. So I'm not sure. It depends, you know, what the circumstances are as to whether there's maybe a younger resident, but they're relatively unusual. They tend to be age specific. There will be some, but there aren't many, to be fair. I think for me that raised a very interesting question about the lack of on the carers front. People need advice really in terms of, you know, this loss of home in the community, because steps can be taken so that people don't, you know, whether even in rented, but certainly in owner occupied, you know, what are the legal routes for gaining a foothold onto a parent's property so that it doesn't immediately disappear over the hill. And I think there's a need for specialist advice for people to be able to go and say, this is my plan, how can we secure our future? And there are ways of getting funding. It struck me, you know, there are other routes, not the ones I would particularly push, but you can draw down equity from a house. So there needs to be a kind of holistic view about certainly the 80% you can self-fund, and the different models that can come up with better solutions.
Yeah, thank you. Florine or Melanie, do you want to comment on this as well?
No, it's not really something that I can comment, sorry.
Fair enough. I suspect it's the same for you, Melanie, but
yeah, no, I mean, just to say we don't have any kind of any specific evidence on that, but yeah, I imagine that it would be a concern for people in that situation. So yeah.
Great, thank you. So we've got a few minutes left before the end of this session. We've run out of questions, but I just wanted to really ask you, Melanie, Florine, and John, if you have any final thoughts, or if you want to ask one of the other speaker a question. So maybe we'll start in order. So if we start with you, Melanie, if you have a question or any final comments.
Just to say that we will be publishing our next State of Caring survey actually next week. And we were really, as I mentioned in my presentation, we were really grateful to HousingLIN and members for sharing that. So just wanted to draw attention to that. It's really valuable for our campaigning activities. Anyone who's a carer can take part. It doesn't matter how much caring you're providing, and it really gives us a picture of what unpaid caring is like for people at the moment. So yeah, just a bit of a plug for that, which will go live next week, and then we'll get fresh data that we can use.
Great. Yeah, we'll make sure to share that with our followers. So anybody in the audience who has not registered yet to receive our newsletters, make sure to do so. And we'll share all this information with you next week. Florine, any final question, remark, comments?
Yeah, thank you. So I would have a question for Melanie, actually. So I have seen previous studies about the issues regarding the impact of caring on people's finances and struggling with day-to-day expenses. My kind of curiosity is related to the fact that, so my understanding is that most carers, or a large part of carers, are past their working age. So there are people probably who are in retirement or have a pension or live on benefits. So I'm wondering what is the explanation of these population group? Why would they struggle more with finances if they provide care, if they not really lose employment? So is care affecting in a way, or is care increasing household finances even without losing other employment?
Yeah, I think it's just there are so many costs involved in caring, and it could be just anything from specialist food that you need to buy for somebody. It could be transport costs of taking someone to an appointment. I mentioned the kind of things like the energy bills, because you're having the heating on a lot of the time, and those costs just really mount up. And I think for a lot of people, they end up having to use savings on those costs because they don't have enough financial support from elsewhere to meet them. They've had to reduce or give up work, so they don't have that income, and they're not able to contribute to a private pension. So it can be really difficult for people to manage those different costs, particularly people who are caring for multiple people. If you're what we would term sandwich carers, even if you're caring for a child and an adult relative as well, it can just be really difficult to meet those costs. And then for older carers, some of the kind of proposals and actions that government has taken recently have really not been helpful, such as the changing the eligibility criteria for the winter fuel allowance and restricting that. So we were really pleased to hear that that decision is being reversed. So we should hear something in the spending review tomorrow about that, because for a lot of older carers, they'd lost that source of support as well, which was really valuable to them.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you, Melanie. Don, any final remark?
I kind of want to respond to that last set of discussion, really, because I've become involved very minorly on a friend of a friend who's in her 30s. Her dad has early onset dementia, living in a home 2 hours away. And this lady's in employment, but is in the process of giving up employment because it's the only way of being able to help and support her dad. He's not yet ready to consider long-term care. And that just illustrates the many different dynamics of what can have been quite a stable financial situation, earning money, but it's just not practical for this particular person to manage his needs without giving up work, at least in the short term. And that just highly illustrates the risks and the challenges. And I think there's a schism. It's older people might be a more set group, but carers go from, caring responsibilities could be for a 12-month-old, a 2-year-old, or a 50-year-old. And I wanted to give that as an illustration.
Great, thank you very much. So it's just past 5, so we're going to draw today's session to a close. So a big thank you to all our speakers today, Melanie, Florin, and John. Thank you very much for your thought-provoking presentations, and for everyone in the audience for joining us. And so yeah, as we mark Carers Awareness Week this week, today's discussion really, I think, reminds us that improving housing outcomes for carers, whether it's formal or informal, is both a a research challenge and a moral imperative, really. So please do visit the HousingLIN website for follow-up resources and to explore our current work in this area. And we hope you'll continue these conversations in your own organizations and networks. Just a very quick mention of next week's Happy Hour webinar, which will be hosted in partnership with the Alms House Association, and in which we'll be exploring the evolving role of alms houses in the 21st century. Registrations are open and you can book your place now if you haven't already. So thanks once again, and enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and see you soon. Take care. Goodbye.
Thank you all.